I've been hiking the Sheltowee Trace National Recreation Trail for as long as I can remember. I was born and raised in Kentucky, and this place has always felt like my second home. There's something about the woods here that calls to me. The rustling of the trees, the smell of pine, and the sight of the early morning mist hanging low over the trail. I never really had a reason to worry about anything on my hikes, aside from maybe the occasional snake or bear sighting. But I can tell you this, nothing could have prepared me for what I encountered one morning that changed my life forever. It was a typical early morning in late fall. The kind of morning where the air is crisp and the sunlight is just starting to filter through the trees, casting long shadows across the ground. I got to the trailhead just before dawn, eager to get started. I'd always liked being on the trail early before it got crowded with other hikers. There was something peaceful about it, just me, the woods, and the sounds of nature waking up. But that morning, the woods didn't feel as welcoming as they usually did. As soon as I stepped out of my car, I heard barking. A lot of barking. It wasn't the kind of barking you hear from someone's pet dog either. This sounded wild, aggressive. I stood still for a moment, listening. The barking was coming from deep in the woods, somewhere off to the right of the trailhead. I thought it was weird, but I brushed it off. Maybe someone had let their dogs loose for a run, or there was a farm nearby with some unruly animals. It didn't cross my mind that I should be worried. Not yet. I grabbed my backpack, slung it over my shoulder, and set off down the trail like I'd done hundreds of times before. The barking continued as I walked, but it seemed distant, and I figured it was far enough away not to be an issue. About 10 minutes in, though, things started to feel off. The woods were quieter than usual, too quiet. No birds, no rustling of leaves, just the crunch of my boots on the dirt path and that eerie silence that clung to everything. I quickened my pace a little, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. That's when I saw it. Out of nowhere, a dog, no, not just a dog, this thing looked feral, ran across the trail just a few yards in front of me. It was snarling, its lips curled back to reveal sharp, yellowed teeth. It didn't look like it belonged to anyone, and the way it moved was unsettling. I yelled at it to scare it off, waving my arms, but it barely flinched before disappearing into the bushes on the other side of the trail. My heart was racing now, but I told myself it was just a stray, maybe rabid, but not something I couldn't handle. I kept walking, but a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I tried to shake it off, but a few minutes later, that barking I'd heard earlier, it was back, and it was closer. Much closer. I stopped in my tracks and scanned the woods. That's when I saw them. At least 10 dogs, wild, snarling, and dripping with saliva, emerged from the underbrush. They were staring at me, their eyes glowing in the dim morning light. These weren't normal dogs. They looked off. Mangy, thin, like they hadn't eaten in days. And the way they looked at me, I swear they weren't just looking. They were sizing me up, like they were deciding if I was going to be their next meal. I took a step back, and that's when they moved in closer, their growls deep and menacing. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I knew I was in serious trouble. These weren't just strays. This was a pack, and they were hungry. I turned and started walking faster, trying to keep my cool, but I could hear them following me. Their paws thudding against the dirt, their growls growing louder. I broke into a run. Suddenly, I tripped. A rock or a tree root, I don't even know what, and hit the ground hard. In an instant, one of the dogs was on me. It lunged at my head, but all it got was my hat. The thing ripped it off and shook it like it was a toy, tossing it to the ground. Another dog grabbed my shoe, yanking so hard it almost pulled me with it. My adrenaline was through the roof. I kicked and scrambled to my feet, barely shaking them off. At this point, I wasn't just running. I was sprinting, my heart pounding in my chest, fear pushing me faster than I'd ever moved in my life. I could hear them behind me, their growls and snarls growing louder as they closed in. I could feel their hot breath on my legs, hear the snap of their jaws as they lunged at me. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to keep going, to make it to my car. but the parking lot felt miles away. Somehow, I made it out of the tree line and could see my car up ahead. A few people were in the parking lot, families getting ready for a hike, older folks stretching by their cars, and they all froze when they saw me barreling toward them with a pack of wild dogs hot on my heels. I tripped again, this time crashing right into the side of my car. I thought that was it. I thought for sure they were going to catch me, tear me apart right there in front of everyone. But somehow I managed to scramble to my feet, rip open the car door, and throw myself inside just as the first dog lunged at the door, its teeth snapping inches away from my arm. I slammed the door shut and the dogs swarmed the car. They were jumping up, scratching at the windows, barking and growling like mad. The whole car was shaking as they threw themselves against it, their eyes wild with hunger. The people in the parking lot just stood there, staring in disbelief, like they couldn't process what they were seeing. I threw the car into reverse and peeled out of there, the dogs chasing me all the way to the end of the lot. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, driving as fast as I could away from that place. I didn't stop until I was halfway home. I've never been back to the Sheltowee Trace Trail since that day. I couldn't. I know people will say it was just a pack of wild dogs, that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But those dogs, they weren't normal. The way they looked at me, the way they moved, it wasn't natural. I still have nightmares about it, about their snarls, their teeth, the feeling of their breath on my neck as I ran for my life. I've hiked a lot of trails in my time, but I'll never set foot on that one again. Some things, once you've experienced them, you just can't forget. And for me, that trail is haunted by the memory of those dogs, the ones that almost killed me.